So welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and this is a map which I have played on before, although none of the battles that I've done on it have been really suitable for showing. They were either very one-sided or of a nature that wasn't really too entertaining to watch, quite grindy, and mainly that is because this is a map which the temptation is to camp on it very much so. I mean, it's a very interesting looking map, obviously. It is a variation of several of the mountain pass maps that have been shown before. There's a lot of pathways up and around the hills and such. And this one should, I hope, have a lot more movement than the ones that I've played on it, because I do like this map quite a lot. The only problem is, most of the time when people tend to play on it, they do like to dig themselves into a position which is obviously unassailable for the other team to get them out of, but we'll see. And this is going to be a 3 versus 5, and there is a very good reason for that. The team of 3 consists, I think, of 3 teams of the neutrals, or no, actually. Only one of the neutrals is going to be on this team. The others, he's going to be joined by Mirkwood and Isengard, obviously the neutrals. And the player who sent this into me was Master Blaster. And this time the neutrals are completely unbound. They can bring anything in their roster, which of course includes some very powerful units, although quite how powerful, I guess we'll see. But we'll start off with the red team, I think, mainly because we probably won't be able to see all of them. And of course I've had to turn the graphics down a little bit. We can see these 2D sprites that are now the trees. Unfortunately, that shouldn't affect things too badly, but we'll start off with Erebor, played by Stormrix, and as we get in a little closer we can see that he's got a front line of the Ironfoot Spears. Now obviously a pretty dependable front line. They've got a lot of mass behind them, of course. Nice anti-cavalry bonus, which in this section of the map might be useful, because this is one of the few sections of this map which is a little bit more open, so hopefully you can zone out the cavalry, but of course the mass is going to be the primary factor here in the mountain pass battles. He's also got the Ironfoot Warriors, which are of course the standard melee infantry version. You often see more warriors than spears, so this is a little bit unorthodox here from Stormrix. And obviously the Ironfoot Warriors, very, very capable frontline infantry units, as you would expect from the Dwarves. Ironfoot Axe Throwers as well, again in this sort of situation where through the passes there are several narrow choke points, which the Axe Throwers can be used on, but they do need to be careful because there's a lot of high ground that the archers can use to start peppering them down as well. You've got to be very careful and be very aware of your surroundings on this map. Ironfoot Crossbowmen, very similar story here. If they can get into a good position, they could be the sort of unit which can decide the match, but if they don't, they will probably be focused down pretty quickly. I've also got some Ironfoot Wargoats, so some Shock Cav here, potentially very damaging, of course. A Dwarven Catapult, which is already firing, some Dwarven Halberd, so a lot of pole arms here, a lot of ability to hold the line, and some Axe Guard, of course, some nice AP shock units, and there may very well be some units hidden in that tree line over there as well. Now, however, we shall go into the hills themselves to Ragnar, who is playing as Mordor, and he has got all of his troops in one big blob, so I'll do my best to sort of give you the outline here. He's got some Morannon infantry, of course. He's got some scouts in there as well, so some cheap archers. On this map, it might be worth investing in some of your better archers, actually, which is counterintuitive when you're playing as someone like the Orcs. But Mordor do have some nice options with their Shadow Guard and their Temple Guard. He's got his Temple Executioners, however, back here with the armour upgrade. He's got some Morannon Halberds to hold the lines in the pass. Some Orc Javelins as well, which will be good for the same reasons, potentially, as the Axe Throwers are obviously not quite as potent, but cheaper, and 3 units of them. 2 units of Minas Morgul Chosen, good for holding the line. And then he's got some Black Riders back here. Now the Black Riders are a unit which is, technically speaking, rebels only. I'm not sure how Mordor have managed to get their hands on them for this battle. But they are here, obviously a mounted version of the Nazgul essentially. And then we've got the Olag High as well. And that's pretty much a good basic overview of his forces. Then, right here at the back, just behind the mountain pass, and they will obviously be moving up as the battle goes on, we've got Yellow playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains. He's got some Blackback Berserkers, which the General is a part of that unit. Cave Trolls, of course, could be invaluable in the narrow passes that make up the centre of this map. The Snow Trolls, of course you can just avoid the pass completely and go right round the edge if you so choose. That might happen, although I somewhat doubt it. I think the team of 3 will need to utilise the choke points well. A lot of Goblins here, Goblin Infantry, Spears, presumably. We've got some standard infantry, and of course we've got some crossbows and some archers as well. So pretty much standard Misty Mountains fare, although maybe I would have expected to see a little bit more in terms of wargs, just so that they can patrol the outside of the map, but if they go right into the mountain pass, then they won't really need that. Meanwhile, over here we have Khazad-dûm, played by Long Live Rhodesia, and he has got some Warriors of Khazad-dûm here on the front, of course, very similar to the Ironfoot Warriors, only slightly better, I believe. some Dwarven Miners as well, obviously. AP Shock Militia units, which is a nice thing to have. Some 3rd Legion, of course back here we've got Balin rolling with the Legion Bodyguard. And over here the Orcons of Khazad as well. Could be very, very good if they take up the right position in the mountain pass ahead. And you can see it's quite an imposing sight in the middle there, and there's a lot of roads, as we've seen, going through the hills. And he's got some Sons of the Fallen at the back with some mercenary guildsmen. And the final red team player, we have Gondor, played by the Steward of Dale. He has got some Nimlothian Honor Guard at the back, which is presumably his general. Yes, it is. Very, very strong unit, the Shielded Fountain Guard. A Trebuchet, which again, in this sort of battle, could be effective. It's already got somewhat of a shot on the Mirkwood forces over there, but we'll see. He's not got any cavalry, so he does need to sort of move his way into the hills rather quickly, I think. Otherwise, if the enemy team has cavalry, he could find himself in a bit of trouble. Some Elisar's Vanguard, some Caer Andros Swordmasters, Pelargir Marines. He's layered his army up. He's got some Fountain Guard as well, of course. You know, Gondor will always bring that, really. Then we've got the Gondor Infantry with all the armour upgrades available to them, so going to be pretty decent in the choke points at staying alive. And then some Gondor Archers once again with the armour upgrades. Now then, we'll take a look at the first of the blue team armies. Frodo is playing as the Realm of Mirkwood. He's got some Maethir Lasgellen, which are, of course, when you see Lothlorien and Mirkwood on the field, you can bet you're going to see some Lasgellen. Purely because they're a very good anti-cavalry tool, but also, you know, javelins in general can potentially be very high damage. And of course, Elven units can look after themselves in melee reasonably well, so there's a little bit less risk with bringing them compared to a very much a focused javelin unit, like you can see. You've got some Delupengi, and Dwyer in here as well. They are hidden at the moment, but of course rangers on this map in particular could be extremely devastating. Here at Alth, here at Ek, and here at Peng. So obviously all of the Mirkwood central core here. Thurney Tower as well, obviously very good archer units. We've actually got some champions of the White Hand from Son of the Dunedain there, from the Isengard army. Obviously a lot of the Mirkwood forces are almost certainly hiding, but we also have another detachment of his army down here. Some here at Alth, some here at Ek, some Yarthalion e Nanwaith, or Yarargwe e Nanwaith as well, so both of those units put together, Maethir Lasgellen and here at Peng. Now this unit over here, Gondor unfortunately is not really going to be able to take advantage of these units maybe being left behind, or maybe going up around here because they don't have any cavalry to chase them down. So that'll be, you know, a bit of a shame for Gondor, that, but they will adapt, I'm sure. The rest of the Isengard army, meanwhile, some Uruk-hai pikemen. Again, in a choke point they can be useful, but with all of the positions for archers to take up, they're going to need to be careful. We've got some Uruk-hai crossbows as well, for the same reason as the Erebor crossbows. They could be extremely devastating on this match. Nazkai, Uruk-hai berserkers. We've got some guards of Orthanc, as well as more crossbows over here, some infantry, and some Snaga as well. So, you know, a lot of the Isengard forces here. The Isengard Ballista has got quite a nice position up on this hill, although technically speaking, the blue team needs to move forward, because if you see up there, the peak of the mountain, the red team are going to be able to get to that first, I think. So the onus might actually be on the blue team to push forward, otherwise the red team could just bombard them from on high. Now, however, actually no, silly me, Master Blaster has been able to deploy some of his troops up here, so he will be able to contest this, although this detachment of his units probably won't be able to finish them off all by themselves. There's nothing really super powerful up here, but there is some Orc Hunters, of course, nice archer unit. The Greenway Guards, which I believe are still AP, similar vein to the Heavy Goblin Spears, only less of them. And then there's some Warriors of Khazad as well with the armour upgrade, so a nice detachment up here on the peak, which they are going to need to distract the enemy so they can't get into position quite so easily. Meanwhile, we've got some... Now this is a unit which I'm interested to see in action. At the moment we can't really see them because they're hiding and they're sort of clipping through the floor, but it is the Dead of the Marshes. There are 250 of them. I don't quite know what the stats of these guys actually are. It's flip-flopped around a little bit throughout the development of all of the mods that I've used them in. And this is actually, I think, the first time I'm seeing them in Reforged. I saw them quite a lot in Moss. But in Moss they were very, very powerful, but there weren't very many of them. There's 250 of them in this unit here, which leads me to believe, my guess would be they're similar to the Barrow Wights, only they're capable of dishing out damage. They're very difficult to kill in melee. Be interesting to see how they get on with that. There's some Thieves of Tharbad over here, of course, an assassin unit backing them up. Be interesting to see how that works. And some Bandit Javelins with their AP. What's going on down here? We can see some Black Riders, we already saw them for Mordor, obviously, mounted Nazgul, and some Ents. These two units alone won't be able to destroy the entire Erebor army, but they might well make their advance a little bit more awkward. Up here we can see another detachment of Master Blaster's army. We've got some Morroquendi units and some Thranduil units, and also some sentries of custom, so some pikes, spears and archers. And then finally, the units he's kept at the back. We've got a couple of units of Black Walls, obviously berserker units. And then finally, I'm sure you could see the green glow of these guys in the distance. Now this is a unit which I'm interested to see how they do, the Oathbreakers. Now I'm fairly certain that they are still wretchedly overpowered, in the sense that when I saw them in action last, they had a melee defense which actually went over the limit that could be shown on the army selection screen, and it essentially made them nigh impossible to kill in a sustained melee fight. But they can be killed. They can be killed by ranged fire and charges, so we'll see how this goes. Oathbreakers, of course, will be very, very powerful, but without further ado, this is quite a long battle, so let's begin. And immediately, of course, the neutrals are going to have to get into a position that they can at least defend in. And you can see that Mordor are actually right down the hill from them, and if Mordor's entire army charges this pocket of resistance, this is going to be pretty ugly, I think, for the neutrals here. But again, we shall see. Meanwhile, you can see over there the Dwarven Catapult. The neutrals need to be real careful that they don't lose their Black Riders and their Ents so quickly and so easily to the Dwarven Catapult, because that's really the only thing stopping Erebor from just advancing forward and having free reign all over the right-hand side of the map, according to the minimap. And of course that would be devastating, because it would mean that stuff like the Dead of the Marshes could be recharged. Having said that, all of these units are hidden, so maybe Erebor won't notice them. But I definitely think that the neutral army here has got the hardest task, because they've spread their resources quite thin, and Mirkwood and Isengard are both not really in a position to rapidly reinforce them, especially seeing as the neutrals may very well have to deal with the full fury of the Erebor army, which you can see moving forward, and of the Mordor army. This will definitely be a good test to see how powerful the Dead of the Marshes and the Oathbreakers really are, because I don't feel as though the neutrals are going to get very far unless those units can do some really, really heavy lifting. We can actually see over here that Isengard are sending over a decent amount of forces, and also the neutrals are going to get them out of there. The Oathbreakers need to be careful, actually, because the Ironfoot Wargoats with their charge could probably do some damage to them. Obviously in sustained melee it would be a complete disaster. Thranduil Erin are going to retreat, I think. It's going to be interesting to see if Erebor sees these hidden units or not. If they do, then it's going to be a disaster, I think. The neutral army initially will suffer some really hefty losses. But the Black Riders did manage to save themselves. These Thranduil Erin need to turn around and get ready to receive the charge of the Ironfoot Wargoats, but I think the neutral player's attention was focused elsewhere. And a rear charge is going to be devastating. The Ironfoot Wargoats have got a really hefty charge bonus on them. I think they're one of the few units, because of the way the goats work, they've got like a weird odd charge bonus. It's not 5, 10, 15 or 20, I think it's something like 18. Because of some bonus that the goats have, but obviously still doing some substantial damage to the Thranduil. But the goats can't afford to stick around too long, because of course they are spears. The standard Wargoats at the very least are not multiple HP, and they don't have shields either, so these arrows are going to do some nasty damage. The Morroquendi bow is already causing several of them to fall. And actually this could be a bit dangerous for the Ironfoot Wargoats, because the Black Riders are coming in. And needless to say, the Black Riders have got some very hefty hit point values. With the support of this arrow fire, the Ironfoot Wargoats are going to take losses. They're shaken already. Naturally, the Black Riders are a fear-causing unit. But obviously the Black Riders are not going to try and solo the entirety of that Dwarven army. The neutral general is in the Black Riders as well. So, it looks as though the first true infantry engagement is going to happen up here, although for the time being it is mostly a skirmish fight. I'm actually surprised that Mordor is not conserving their ammunition for later and simply using brute force to destroy this neutral army, because if they were to take this position and then put their archers up on this ridge over here, Isengard and the neutral reinforcements they've received would be powerless to stop Mordor from shooting down on them. As it is, though, a lot of Mordor's ammunition is going to be expended just moving this small amount of resistance over here. Apologies, the dog was just threatening to knock things off the shelf. But yeah, I would just use brute force if I was Mordor. The numbers and the quality of these units is not going to be able to stand up to some of Mordor's nastier units. The Olag High alone would be a real problem for these units. But as it is, the neutral army is having it its own way for the time being. Meanwhile, we we can see over here that the Dwarves of Erebor are now moving forwards, and I think they can see an opportunity to attack this army from over here. This does mean, and this is going to come down to, I think... Ooh, that's a bit of a risky move there. These bandit javelins doing a nice amount of damage, actually, to the Ironfoot warriors. They had the perfect position, of course. And with their armor-piercing projectiles, they will be able to do a lot of damage. I'm not sure if the bandit javelins are actually rebalanced for 0.96, so they might be a little bit strong compared to what they're meant to be, but overall they are still just a javelin unit, so it's to be expected that they can inflict casualties on the heavily armoured dwarves. But of course, over here it's largely going to come down to, I think, the Dead of the Marshes, but the neutrals will be able to attack from two directions. They'll be able to attack from here and here, of course. And potentially then, they will be able to attack from the rear with the Ents and the Blackwolds. So the dwarves might be marching into a bit of a meat grinder here against a lot of units which potentially will be very good against them. Meanwhile, let's go and see what's happening over on the left-hand side of the map. We can see that Gondor are starting to move into the mountain pass now, although the Mirkwood forces have sort of set up a pretty decent defence. Although, again, over here I feel as though the sheer force of numbers that Gondor could bring to bear could smash through the initial defence here. I feel as though the red team definitely need to recognise the fact that, you know, they outnumber the blue team here by a huge margin, so they can afford to be quite reckless in what they do. And using their sheer weight of numbers, they should be able to smash these lines to bits. Especially seeing as for a large portion of the high ground is going to be theirs when this pocket of resistance from the neutrals has been wiped out, which, again, still more of a skirmish fight over here. And again, this is where Mordor's skimping on their archers will hurt them a little bit, because the scouts, there are a lot of them, but they are not a great archer, and they are definitely not going to be a match for the Orcs of Khazad-dûm, especially when they've got a superior position. But this is where a lot of the action could be happening now. We can see that the Ironfoot Wargoat's actually routing. They presumably took a full frontal volley from the javelins over here, and the javelins still doing a nice amount of damage to Stormrix's army, and the Black Riders, of course, making the Dwarven advance just a little bit more awkward. And another nice charge there. These Ironfoot warriors taking a real beating. But of course, the true danger maybe has yet to reveal itself. I mean, the Thieves of Tharbad are pretty nasty in melee themselves, but I'm very interested to see how the Dead of the Marshes get on here. This is a bit of a meat grinder so far. Isengard have actually sent over some reinforcements, the Uruk-hai pikemen, although they are not going to be able to get into position quickly enough, so they're going to have to either fall back, which they are doing so now, going to fall back to the safety of the Morroquendi bows firing line, and there's some Hiri Peng coming over here as well, so some nice interplay here by the blue team, which of course they do need to do, essentially, because they are so horribly outnumbered. They need to play this very smartly. The Thieves of Tharbad are going to charge downhill. The Thieves of Tharbad are good, but they're not like a world-beating unit, so their presence on the front line will be obviously appreciated, but I feel as though the Dead of the Marshes are going to be the true stars of the show here. As the Ironfoot warriors charge forth, once again the Black Riders trying to do some damage. You can see over there, actually, the Ents have sprung their trap, and they're dealing with the Axe Guard. You'd imagine that an axe would be quite good against a giant living tree. But still, as a single unit, obviously the Ents will have a very similar effect that Trolls have on units. They will squash them quite easily, tossing the unit around in a very nasty fashion. The Halberds are now moving forward. You can see over in the background there, Yellow's heavy goblin army from the Misty Mountains is slowly but surely making its way around here. So eventually you'd have to assume that this part of the map would start to struggle under the numbers. Meanwhile, oof, that frame rate, I suppose I should have expected this. The Dead of the Marshes are now in melee, which actually we can get a nice good close look at them. They're obviously a mixture of dead Arnorian units, or Numenorian units I suppose I should say. Obviously there's some elves in there, there's some goblins, and they're there, and they're also receiving support from the Black Riders. The Thieves might struggle a little bit under all of these dwarven numbers. Now this is a bit of a problem. This catapult could yet prove to be a very potent investment indeed. The frames are going to abandon me for large portions of this battle, I fear. But carving their way through that portion of the line nicely. They're going to have to try and find a way to spread out in this narrow canyon, which is not going to be the easiest thing to do, but the Morroquendi bows are returning fire. The Dwarven catapult is quite wildly inaccurate. We'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, you can see over here that the engagement has begun. Obviously Mirkwood taking advantage of the position they're in, the Delupengi, Emanduir shooting into the back of this Gondorian advance, which they are now trying to use their numbers But again, this carries obvious risks of its own. Mirkwood are now going to be able to utilise their very potent skirmishers to its full effect on this Gondorian assault. Gondor are really going to struggle to get through this, actually. You can see the Mesa Skellen. They will also be able to throw their payload when necessary. The Pelagia Marines are going to be returning fire in kind, doing some damage there to the Hiri Ek, but you'd have to imagine that the Pelagia Marines will probably be focused down by the Mirkwood skirmishers as well. Here comes some Snaga. Gondor are at least spreading their attack a little bit, so they are trying to go up multiple directions. The Wardens of Minas Ithor down there, and Caer Andros Swordmasters are coming up as well. But the Swordmasters, you would imagine, not going to respond too well to ranged firepower. But this is where the numbers of the attackers will probably start to pay some serious dividends. They're going to be able to spread themselves out like this and maintain an assault from multiple directions, whereas I'm not sure the blue team will be able to maintain a defence. We shall see. Let's see what's happening up on the high ground. Now this is what I was expecting Mordor to do right from the off. They are charging right up and they're going to take the summit. And there's not much that the neutrals can do to stop them here. It's possible that Mordor, utilising a lot of their ranged firepower, has already blunted the effectiveness that Mordor can have from up here. But they will of course be able to transition to the other side of the battlefield from up here and potentially reinforce Gondor and put some more pressure on Mirkwood, which you would have to imagine with this amount of orcs crashing down on them from above, Mirkwood would start to struggle pretty substantially. Let's go and see what's happening over here though. See if the Dead of the Marshes have taken any casualties so far. They have, and defeat does seem certain for them. But defeat also seems certain for the Dwarves. So I would imagine things aren't going too well for either of these forces at the moment, although now the neutrals are attacking forward, the Morroquendi coming forth. There are still those Black Wolves in the background, which could of course move in when needed. Those Ironfoot warriors are breaking. But at this point, the Misty Mountains have arrived. There's those cave trolls as well. And there's still some fire coming in from the bandit javelins, although they've taken some skirmish fire in return. Needless to say, they're not exactly the most survivable unit. A combination there of friendly fire and hits on the enemy. The neutrals being very aggressive here. The Black Riders have also taken some casualties at this point in time. The Dead of the Marsh is still doing their thing. But I feel as though the Black Wolves have revealed themselves, and they are going to be necessary here if they're going to keep up this defence for much longer. With the numbers that the Goblins are going to bring to the table, it's going to be pretty rough for them, you would imagine. But having said that, the Dwarven army over here has taken a real beating so far. If it was just the Dwarves, I would imagine that the blue team would probably have victory here, but with all of the Goblins, especially with the Cave Trolls, I feel as though it's going to be difficult for them to reconcile that. There is of course another defence they've set up, and there is that Ballista which has taken up a nice position to cover this road when the neutrals do inevitably fall, which I imagine they will, but they may take a heavy enough toll to make their defence worth it. Meanwhile over here, you can see the Caer Andros Swordmasters have moved forward into a melee with the Hiri Alth, but naturally the Hiri Peng shooting at them from a perfect angle, and this is going to be nasty. Even the good armour values that the Gondorians tend to have will not save them here. And now the Champions of the White Hand trying to wriggle free, which is going to be an interesting thing to behold. Primarily a Mirkwood defence, and oh, look at this. This has been brutal so far. The Pelagia Marines are coming forward, but this defence has gone very heavily in favour of Mirkwood, just dumping all of their skirmish ammo into this, and they threw off the Gondorian assault with ease, really. The Trebuchet is trying to get into position, and unfortunately for Gondor, I don't think he's going to receive the same reinforcements that the Dwarven player on the other side received. I think that the Khazad-dûm player has simply advanced in. Yeah, the Khazad-dûm player, Long Live Rhodesia, has advanced into the hills. But they would definitely be well served waiting for Mordor. A coordinated assault is what's called for here. The Gondorian player has taken such a hefty beating at this point in time. But this side is going to be a pretty heavy win so far for the blue team. Over on the other side, however, well, we'll go to the centre first of all and see what's going on the peak. I'm very surprised, actually. These Greenway Guards have held up remarkably well. I mean, you'd have to imagine now that with the Mordor infantry sort of spilling through the gap that they have created, that isn't going to last for too much longer, especially not with the Black Riders in the background. But I think that the neutrals, considering the fact they only committed a portion of their army up here to defend, they can afford to be quite pleased with themselves, especially seeing as they forced Mordor, or got Mordor at the very least, to waste a decent supply of their ammunition, which means taking the peak for Mordor won't be as dangerous for the blue team as it otherwise would have been. Although now we can see the Black Riders, we've already seen how deadly they can be. That was a bit of a tame charge, however. They didn't really have the space to get up to full speed. Around on infantry coming in, but yeah, those Greenway Guards won't last for too much longer. And they are now wavering. Meanwhile, down here, this is where the red team have had the most joy so far. And now you can see that the Goblin Infantry have advanced through this area over here, so they are going to catch the Dead of the Marshes in between them. There are still just under 200 of them. They're definitely not the easiest unit in the world to take down. And at this point, the Dead of the Marshes could be a case of just trying to hold as many goblins at bay that they can. Let's see what's going on over here. We can see these Hiri Alth taking some heavy damage from the cave trolls. However, the Black Wolds are in the back line, and needless to say, the Black Wolds will be pretty good against the vast majority of Dwarven and Misty Mountains units with that heavy AP damage they do. Obviously, when they're in close quarters like this, their primary weakness against ranged fire can't be exploited too heavily, although those crossbows might beg to differ on that. This is where the frame rate is at its worst, unsurprisingly. Hiri Peng, both units of Hiri Peng here are firing. The blue team have committed a fair amount of resources over here, which could turn out to be a good thing in the long run, because they're inflicting some really heavy damage. The Erebor army is not going to look pretty after this. The Goblin army should be enough, however, to give them victory, you would imagine, unless the Dead of the Marshes are really able to solo them to a huge extent, but I don't think so. The Dead of the Marshes are starting to take some fairly hefty losses, although the Nanwaith are coming in now. The Arithalion Nanwaith, obviously very, very powerful, very heavy damage dealers as well, so they should be able to augment the Dead of the Marshes very nicely. Ooh. These blob fights, the frames just disappear almost immediately. The Black Wolds will be able to do extreme damage to heavy Goblin infantry all day long. The Cave Trolls, if they were to turn around, would do a lot of damage in return. Indeed, over here, this unit of Black Wolds is just being collapsed in on by Trolls and all sorts of Dwarven infantry. But in other places, I'm taking to calling them the Defenders, purely because they're outnumbered, they're doing okay. What is this red triangle in here? There is a red... Oh, I see, it's routing Ironfoot spears. As expected, I suppose. You can see there in the middle on the mini-map. The summit is now filled with just red arrows. Mordor have been successful. Gondor, on the other hand, not having quite such an easy time of it. They've got their Gondor archers into a position where they can actually return fire into the defensive positions and do some damage of their own. Although they are targeting the Hiri Alth, which is one of the only Mirkwood units which can stand up quite well to arrow fire with those shields. But the Nimlothian Honor Guard as well, taking some nasty fire. But this might be ugly for the Gondorian archers. They're going to be introduced to the champions of the White Hand. And needless to say, the Gondorian generals also died. So Gondor, they really needed the support of Khazad-dûm. If they just waited a little bit for the support of the dwarves, they could have maybe effected a little bit more of an advance. But as it is, the elven defense they set up here is a real nightmare trying to advance through this canyon when Merc would have got their skirmishers, especially the Delupeng, the Emondwyr, set up on perfect positions. There are bandits down here. Bandits, not necessarily going to be the best thing to deal with Mirkwood infantry, but at least they can absorb some more arrow fire, I suppose. What's going on down here? We can see the green tint of the Oathbreakers there, loitering with intent. The Trolls of the White Hand as well, with their derpy faces. But this could well prove to be a pretty important engagement here, because if the Misty Mountains are not able to win this substantially, both Erebor and Gondor will have lost huge amounts of both their armies for not an awful lot of gain in terms of territory for the red team. Those Nanwaith over there are charging forward with reckless abandon, but these heavy Goblin archers are going to be able to get huge value off on the Nanwaith. And now I feel as though this is going to be the end of the Nanwaith, because the Black Riders are coming down here, and if they recharge them in the appropriate fashion, that could be nasty. The Dead of the Marshes have turned this fight around with the support of those Khazad-dûm pikes. They are going to be victorious against this horde of Goblin infantry. It's still Maetha Ir Lasgellan, but as I kind of thought, it is the Trolls primarily that are giving the Misty Mountains the edge in this fight. Because they're very good at getting value off against elite targets. They do an awful lot of damage. And they unbalance units spectacularly well. So I do still think the red team will ultimately win this battle, but I don't know if they're going to be able to advance into this canyon with what they have left. It depends on what the Misty Mountains have got in reserve. They've got some Blackback Berserkers, and they do have some more reserves coming around from the backside of the mountain pass. Yeah, they should have enough. I mean, they've got some crossbows as well. But these Blackwolds, defeat does seem certain for them, but they presumably have got an awful lot of kills off against this goblin fodder. I would imagine it's primarily been the dwarven crossbows that have tilted that fight in favour of the Reds. You can see here the Morroquendi pikes are breaking, the snow trolls doing their bit. The Dead of the Marshes are still a relatively healthy unit. Yeah, I feel as though the Arthalion Nanwaith there were wasted pretty horrendously. The Black Riders able to charge them in the rear, and you really don't want to be losing a unit that elite to something so frivolous, especially seeing as their target was heavy goblin archers. That's trash. You don't want to be losing one of your best units on the field for that, and you can now see that the defenders are pulling back. They realise that this area is lost, and they are going to prepare a secondary defence. So essentially both teams have won the initial fights on either side of the field, with the red team of course having the advantage that they have also managed to take the summit, and they do have some archers up here as well, which probably still do have some ammunition, but maybe not as much as they were hoping for. There's some scouts. Interesting. Meanwhile, we can see now the second attack is happening. Unfortunately though, for the red team, it is made up of bandits. And naturally bandits are not going to be a match for the Hiri Youth. And there's some mercenary guildsmen back there as well. Khazad-dûm are just sort of loitering with intent. The trebuchet is trying to get into a position to fire, which not the easiest targets over here. The terrain means they can only really hit stuff that's along this line here. Anything that's just in behind this terrain over here will be very difficult for the trebuchet to hit. And of course they spent all this time getting it up there. To reposition it further forward will be a bit of a bugger. Snaga skirmishers getting into a position to try and use their armour-piercing pointy sticks. But yeah, I feel as though now coordination for the red team is pretty key, because so far the blue team have managed to inflict a lot of casualties onto them. You can see that it is relatively even, but of course the red team had a lot more men to play with. So yeah, I feel as though the red team need to coordinate their assault. If they attack all at the same time and start to do some significant damage, they should be in a pretty good place. The Oathbreakers are now moving forward, which this front line here with the Oathbreakers will naturally be an exceedingly tough one to break down, with the support of the Hiri Ek, obviously, to give them that extra mass as well. Hiri Peng, there's still Elven and Dwarven archers doing the business. Those Ironfoot crossbows, heavy Goblin crossbows as well. So all of these are crossbow bolts that are going to be flying into the defences. I mean, certainly the crossbows would be very well advised to try and go after the Oathbreakers rather than this front line over here. If you see the Oathbreakers, you definitely want to be killing them. The Isengard Ballista is going to be firing into the blobs, doing as much damage as it possibly can, of course. The Isengard Ballista, with its thicker projectiles and higher penetration ability, means it's honestly, in terms of damage, it can dish out just as much, if not more, in certain situations than a catapult can. And for less. It's a very nasty tool that Isengard has indeed. Over here, meanwhile, bandits are being sent forward one at a time. Wave-based combat is definitely not what the red team want to be engaging in here. They're essentially feeding kills to the Mirkwood player, whose initial lines, they're looking a little bit more thin on the ground after they threw off the Gondorians. And you can see there that the mercenary guildsmen, the Khazad-dûm army, it's got some nasty units in it. We'll see how well the dwarves can do potentially. Champions of the White Hand are waiting, loitering with intent. Obviously trying to get some rear charges in there. The trebuchet firing. Honestly, if I were the blue team, I'd hold my nerve and try and get the trebuchet to just waste most of its ammo, because it needs to get a lot of hits if it's going to be effective. All the Lurtz hunting pack is up here on this bit of terrain as well. That's another body-piercing archer unit. There's a long way in this fight to go yet, but we are now essentially at more or less at the 50-50 point in terms of casualties. Let's see how this goes. It's turned into an elongated skirmish fight over here, which doesn't surprise me too much. The red team will of course want to try and utilise their crossbows to their fullest extent. If they were going to do that though, I would have suggested playing the long game, sending them right round to the back of the map and having them climb the mountain from that way, and take up a position on the peak that Mordor captured for them. Doing that will allow them to hit the blue team from above, rather than this situation they've got at the moment. Well, this is not going to be... this is not going to go well. Yeah, the Goblin Infantry, they rout before they even collide with the Elven and Oathbreaker line. Meanwhile, these units here just retreating. The Dead of the Marshes, of course, have been finished off. Some Mordor reinforcements coming down here, so it's now primarily Orcs down here with whatever is left of the Erebor army, which admittedly is not much by the looks of things. It might only be crossbows even. A few halberds as well, but of course they are juicy, juicy targets for the Hiri Peng. Now's when we sort of... This is a bit more like an interlude, the calm before the storm in this match over here. Mirkwood charging downhill into the bandits and mercenary guildsmen. The Trebuchet has got a pretty good shot on them. Interesting that they move forwards. Very dangerous move indeed, but obviously in terms of quality they're going to be able to easily destroy the bandits and the mercenary guildsmen, but it's the Orc Hunter damage that will be the thing. And now Khazad-dûm moving in. The Dalupeng are now getting up here. It'll be interesting to see if they still have ammunition. Those body-piercing projectiles, if they are still on station, could be just the sort of thing which Merc would need to keep this front line alive. Because the blue team more and more will probably get boxed in as the fight goes on. I can't imagine Merc would be able to stand up to the entirety of the Khazad-dûm army. But if Khazad-dûm keep going for this more wave-based approach here, it should suit them quite well. I'm very surprised that the Trebuchet is trying to go for the Dalupeng, because it won't be able to kill the entire unit and it's not got the easiest shot. They'd be much better off going for this infantry round here, because one nice hit could send them breaking, particularly with all the fire arrows that the Orc Hunters are pouring into them. What are the Dalupeng actually targeting? I would assume they're going to go after the Merc Guildsmen. They should be anyway, because more and more forces are going to be moving forward. 3 units of miners is not really the most impressive thing, but it is a battle of attrition over here. And that is a battle which, in the long run, you would expect Mirkwood to start losing, especially with the fire from the Orc Hunters coming in over here. And this is where the primary fight is happening right now. Still, from the looks of things, it's going to be a skirmish fight on the other side of the map. Mirkwood's standing up pretty well to this so far, and they should be able to throw off the Merc Guildsmen at the very least, but eventually I think the damage is going to tell, and then of course it will be up to these Isengard units over here. 3 units of Uruk-hai pikemen. There's also those champions of the White Hand loitering around the outskirts of the battlefield. The Snaga will be a very welcome addition to this defence over here. Their AP projectiles may not be the highest base damage, but they will still do some nice damage to Merc Guildsmen. What's going on the other side? Still more Ironfoot crossbows. Still the skirmish fight continues. I'm very, very surprised that they put the Oathbreakers here on the front line. Presumably they've got a ton of HP, but you really don't want to be expending your HP just absorbing crossbow fire. You want to be having that taken away from you in a sustained melee fight if you can help it. I suppose they're trying to preserve the lives of some of these elves. There's some Aradirith Amon Lank back here now as well as the Yaragwe Inanwe, so some heavy hitting skirmishers here. And something's got to give over here eventually. The red team cannot sit here and skirmish forever, nor will they need to be fair. They've got a lot of forces over here that have massed up. You can see now that the reds have decided to split their attentions, and more of their numbers are over here, to be fair. The Misty Mountains and Mordor combining their forces. Interesting to see how this works out. Erebor and Gondor. That presumably is Gondor, who has admitted defeat. Mirkwood are now going to lose this fight over here with all of the range fire that they've been taking. The Merc Guildsmen will of course be in really rough shape once that is done. The Dalupeng might be out of ammo at this point. They have pulled out their swords. The Snaga, the Hiri Peng. I think they're setting up a secondary line over here where the Snaga can hit them from both sides with those javelins, do some nice damage. But again, I think Khazad-dûm might be able to do some nasty damage. Champions of the White Hand are starting to move. What will they do, I wonder? Are they going to charge? I mean, these warriors of Khazad-dûm are in loose, but they're only warriors of Khazad-dûm. They don't have any anti-cavalry bonus. And the Champions of the White Hand, of course, one of the nastiest mounted units in the game. Arguably the nastiest, from a certain point of view. Definitely in a cav-to-cav fight. And they will charge here. They get up to charge speed. They are in loose, so the warriors of Khazad-dûm won't take extreme damage. But cycle charging in and out of this unit will deprive the Dwarves of Khazad-dûm of yet more valuable manpower. Which, as this fight goes on, they may very well end up needing. It's been a real punishing advance so far for the red team. Gondor and Erebor really took the brunt of it initially. These Merc Guildsmen, once again, Merc would have turned this fight around. Presumably, the Orc Hunters have utilised all their ammunition, at least one unit of them has, and they are now going to be committed to melee. This wave-based approach that the Dwarves have used has fed more kills into Mirkwood than would be otherwise necessary, I think. And again, this trebuchet is firing, but a lot of the trebuchet shots have gone long and missed. And I highly doubt that the Gondorian... Oh no, it wasn't Gondor that committed defeat there. It must have been Erebor. But I highly doubt the Gondorian trebuchet will end up paying for itself in the long run. If they want to get the most out of it, they should reposition it. If they had a lot of patience, they should probably just position it up on the summit. What's going on over here? You can see some repositioning here from the Blues. Aradirith as the Black Riders, and the Aragwe Inanwe, presumably out of ammunition at this stage. There's some Guards of Orthanc ready to reinforce as well from Son of the Dunedain. Another very effective spear unit. You can see that the Oathbreakers standing in the face of this skirmish fire. But, I mean, this is the problem that the blue team have. You know, the red team have got plentiful skirmishers here. And this is one of the true ways of trying to deal with the Oathbreakers. Because the Oathbreakers, provided they haven't been tweaked too much, which I can't imagine they have, will just be able to hold all day long. You know, even against a lot of units. I mean, the Trolls might be able to sort of make their defense a little bit more disjointed. But there's a lot of Goblins here. But the onus is on the blue team to do something here. Because if they just sit here and continue to take this... I mean, the Dalupeng, Em and Dwyer are now firing. But yeah, they need to return fire here. Because now the Moran on Archers are firing, and that's a unit which has only just moved into position, so presumably they've still got enough ammo to sustain some sort of skirmish presence. And honestly, at this point, having your Dalupeng just act as a lightning rod for the skirmish fire might just be worth it. Because I would be very eager to see if the Oathbreakers can take this on and have some sort of success, because the blue team need the Oathbreakers to do an awful lot of work here. Isengard still have a large amount of their force remaining. They've essentially been the ones in reserve this whole time. We'll see if they can make it stick. The Champions of the White Hand have moved back within the blue team's defensive area. And still, this initial Elven line is still technically holding. I think these Orc Hunters are probably going to be the thing to finally push them over the edge. And if not them, then the regrouped units back here should be just the thing. But man, Merc would definitely have been able to hold out longer than Elves usually do. Meanwhile, Goblin Infantry. Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen moving into position, although they still have... No, they don't have ammunition, they've got their blades out. Orc Javelins as well. This is where the 3 units of Orc Javelins that Mordor brought can prove to be very worth it. They are being hit by enemy skirmishers, and this is where the Isengard Ballista needs to target the right things, because there is a lot of blobs that it can choose from. That was a nice hit in the distance we saw there. It's the sort of thing which they definitely need to bring the numbers that Mordor and the Misty Mountains are bringing to bear over on this side down a little bit. You can see meanwhile over on the other side, based on the mini-map, that Khazad-dûm are edging ever closer. This unit of Dalupeng is probably going to be committed to the front line. Rangers tend to have pretty high melee skill. They don't have the highest armour, of course, and against a more traditional front line, eventually they will be worn down. They don't have multiple HP, of course, so they can be brought down over time. But against single units like this, you know, their assistance on the front line will definitely be most welcome. There's still a defence over here, and it's not the sort of thing that Khazad-dûm can afford to take too lightly. Those Snaga there could deal some pretty nasty damage for how cheap they are. And there are several units of Uruk-hai pikemen, which of course can hold units in place for a long time unless you've got the correct units to push through. And all of the trolls, all of the surviving trolls I should say, are over on this side. Oathbreakers now no longer being targeted, which is good for them. Very good news for them. The Dalupang, not so lucky. They're the ones having to lay down their lives. But again, all of those Maraudon archers utilising all of their ammunition on a very depleted unit of Dalupang. Most curious. We are more or less just a little bit before the halfway point, but more or less at the halfway point. We have a look at the kills. The red team are ahead by 4%, but the red team will still need to mount an assault at some point, and I don't know how that's going to go. A lot of it depends on the Oathbreakers, of course. If the Oathbreakers are not up to the task, then this Misty Mountain and Mordor force will overwhelm them and continue that momentum all the way through to Isengard's position over here. Isengard are sending forward some reinforcements, but a singular unit of Uruk-hai infantry and crossbows probably won't be enough, although the fact that Uruk-hai crossbows are now moving forward just goes to show that the blue team do have the ability to continue this defence, and in fact I think Isengard are just going to move forward. I mean, this initial defence that they put up here, goblin infantry and crossbows that are out of ammunition and are also wavering, this is good to see. This is exactly what they need to do at this point, because these goblin units at the front here are definitely not going to be up to the task of stopping the champions of the White Hand. And Uruk-hai infantry are obviously far superior to goblin infantry that you get for free. And this of course means that the champions of the White Hand can continue to charge forward and do nasty damage to the Orc Javelins, and they rout them. So this is ultimately the price that the red team are paying for trying to be more passive, trying to skirmish more. And arguably they lost their window for when the blue team were most vulnerable. Because now Isengard have sent over all of these reinforcements, and now their numbers are not going to be quite so intimidating. Isengard, of course, orcs themselves, not quite so numbers heavy as Mordor or the Misty Mountains, but still, they add a lot of numbers to the equation, and they are also going to be backed up by some skillful elven spears and of course the Oathbreakers, which I think are just, they're locked to being exceedingly slow, so we shall see how this goes. Heavy Goblin Spears moving in, trying to stop the advance, and I think at this point actually the assault has had the effect desired, and they will now move backwards. They've managed to throw off the attacking skirmishers, cause the routing of Orc Javelins, throwing off the Maraudon archers as well, so yeah, that's what I like to see. The champions of the White Hand in particular can keep doing this because their charge is so nasty, but they do need to be careful obviously of the heavy goblin spears. Armour piercing spears, not exactly the nicest thing to have to deal with, even when you're a unit of such power as the champions of the White Hand. Meanwhile, these Dalupang are now really the only thing holding this line, which of course means the end is probably nigh for this defence which has held up for so long. There are still some units over here though. Honestly now, with this weakness, this is when the dwarves probably need to commit everything forward and try and destroy this defence as quickly as they possibly can, because the longer they delay, the more manpower is going to be bled from their orc allies over on the other side of the field. Meanwhile, you can see here what is left of the Black Riders, who did most of their work earlier on in the battle, now going to be used to try and do some chip damage to individual units, just be a bit more of an annoyance. You can see that the Rebels General's model is actually a Plague Doctor, which is amusing. Trebuchet is still going. Still, though, not really getting any hits which could be considered really telling. These Hiri Pang, on the other hand, that was a very close one to being a good hit. Hiri Pang shooting into the back of this front line again, getting yet more kills, bleeding the manpower from the red team, which is all they can really hope to do. These Snarg are taking some ranged fire and wisely taking cover. They are the sort of unit which can very easily pay for themselves in this situation. Might be able to do more than just simply pay for themselves. Could they be the heroes of the hour? We shall see. Isengard have committed a lot of their resources forward here. Now, this is what I think I've been waiting to see. The Oathbreakers are now in melee. And they are being supported by, of course, the Elves and the Uruk-hai. And naturally... Oh, and the Aradirith as well. This could be the engagement which decides things, because the Misty Mountains, well, I say that. They were about to send forward their snow trolls, but then they thought better of it, I suppose, and now there's routing going on. So no, this will not be the engagement which decides it all. But a very good engagement nonetheless for the blue team, because that is a huge rout they just instilled. And there were no inspiration units, it was really just low tier units that they sent in over here, and you can't do that when you're facing off against Oathbreakers and Champions, who both are fear causing units. You would imagine the Oathbreakers are anyway. I know the Champions of the White Hand are, and they are continuing to twist the knife there. The Black Riders are coming forward. The Black Riders, possibly the only unit which can claim to outclass the Champions of the White Hand 1-to-1. Although there are more Champions of the White Hand usually, so I don't know. It's a question for another time, I suppose. That Isengard Ballista doing some nice damage there. And here we can see the Orc army starting to look a little bit more thin on the ground. That big rout, a lot of them have returned, of course, but still a lot of damage done there. Sorry about that. That was just something that I had to deal with elsewhere. Now though, as I was saying, this Orc army is not looking as scary as it did. Now, it is still obviously numerically superior to the defenders, but that excessive skirmishing might cost them in the long run. The Isengard reinforcements that have come over here definitely tip the balance a little bit, and now the tables may very well turn, because the Uruk-hai crossbows could get out in front and do some damage to them on the approach, which suddenly means that this attack over here has become all the more important. You can see these Khazad miners. Meanwhile, these Dwarven miners are just sort of being, in a sort of relay system, these Snarga skirmishers are going to retreat behind one another and presumably try and skirmish the Dwarven miners to death. But now, actually, this Hiri Pang is going to get up onto this hillock over here. These Uruk-hai pikemen are presumably just going to try and hold these guys at bay for as long as possible with the assistance of the Black Riders. And they are only Dwarven miners, so the Black Riders could well send them routing, but with the close proximity of the rest of the Khazad army, I'm not so sure. Another unit of Snarga, which is in a pretty nice position. Obviously, again, the base damage is somewhat in question, and Snarga accuracy is really woeful. Yeah, but this is going to be a very important attack now, because I feel as though the red team kind of need this at this point. They need to start advancing into territory and putting pressure on the blue team. If they can do that, then the blue team may very well find that they don't have the manpower to cover every angle to the extent they need, and then they could start to fall apart. But Isengard have definitely got their ducks in a row with regards to their defence. They've got 2 units of the Lurtz hunting pack, as well as the pikemen. Those body-piercing projectiles are going to be pretty nasty. The dwarves, as we've seen in the past, better placed to deal with that than most, but it is still going to hurt. And now the champions of the White Hand are coming back. They've been all over the place, providing support where needed. Let's see here. That Isengard Ballista still on station. That is it is an intimidating looking front line, I will say. The Uruk-hai crossbows pulling back. And I would say actually that, you know, the defenders are relatively free to do this. I feel as though they need to commit more resources to the other side to deal with the Khazad army. And honestly, if they can just leave the Oathbreakers with some support to hold these orcs at bay for as long as they possibly can, that might be worthwhile. They've also got trolls of their own, trolls of the White Hand. Interesting position over here. The dwarves would actually have the higher ground here if they would take this this part of cliff, but I'm not sure that would help against 2 units of Lurtz hunting pack. Speaking of which, one of them is now firing into the blob of dwarves as they approach. Worth saying as well that the Lurtz hunting pack pretty nasty as a melee unit as well. They are now going to pull back, so they've just skirmished a little bit, doing a little bit more damage. Those Dwarven miners, I think the Snarga have been destroyed, unfortunately. Rest in peace, Snaga. And the dwarves are going to try and get their archers up onto the higher ground. But I think with the Lurtz hunting pack and with that unit of Hiri Peng that still has ammunition, the blues should be able to throw off that. Some Sons of the Fallen. There's still some nasty units from Khazad-dûm, that Legion Bodyguard in particular. Going to be a tricky one. Isengard still have their Naz Kai lurking around somewhere unless I'm very much mistaken. These Black Riders going to be able to pick off this lone detachment of Orc Hunters. Went a little bit too close there. And now they're paying for it. So Khazad-dûm are going to move forward, and as soon as Khazad-dûm attack from that side, I feel as though it is going to be very necessary for the Orcs to attack from this side. That Morannon infantry presumably was just routed from a combination of arrow fire and the Aradirith attacking forward. But a pincer movement is going to be necessary to win this, I think, for the red team, because I think the red team is still 1% ahead, but the blues are dug in with a good defensive position and all the right units to deal with that. So the red team need to play this smart here, otherwise they could end up flailing themselves against the defensive line with no gains. What's going on here? Dwarven miners moving up around here. Just one Black Rider remains, and it is the Plague Doctor himself, the neutral general. Those Lurtz hunting pack, the Hiri Peng over there as well. The second Lurtz hunting pack, the Pikes. It's a good defensive position they've taken up here on this sort of secondary summit. Much lower than the one in the centre of the hill, or mountain. What's going on over here? So Mordor and the Misty Mountains still reluctant to move forward, which is very understandable considering the calibre of the front line they have to deal with. Oathbreakers, backed up by Uruk-hai, Hiri-ek, that Ballista as well on the approach is bound to be something which makes you a little bit nervous. They do have some nasty units of their own, however. They've got Black Riders, which if they get in and amongst the defenders, that could be the sort of thing which wins the Reds the battle. They've got some Snow Trolls, they've got Temple Executioners, and Minas Morgul Chosen as well, a couple of units of them. Which, not the most damaging, but solid. Difficult to get rid of in a sustained fight. Another unit of Minas Morgul Chosen, Heavy Goblin Infantry as well. I believe the Blackback Berserkers should be around here somewhere. They're around. They're another unit which can do a lot of damage. Meanwhile, more of the important action is happening over here. These Orc Hunters are going to try and do some damage to the Uruk-hai front line, which is a good move, although the Lurtz hunting pack are going to return fire, and of course the Orc Hunters, not the most heavily armoured of Dwarven units, so they should fall away. But it is a good move to try and skirmish down the Uruk-hai pikemen, because if these Uruk-hai fall, Khazad-dûm could pour forwards, and as soon as that cohesion is lost in the defenders' ranks, the red team should be able to do the damage necessary to win this. All of Khazad-dûm's army is forward here though, and it definitely doesn't have the same intimidating presence as the Orc ones because there are less numbers. When you look a little closer and see units like Sons of the Fallen and Legion Bodyguard, you can see the threat that Khazad-dûm does carry. What the Khazad-dûm player at this moment in time would give to have some Gondorian support, I'm sure. Meanwhile, you can see the Trebuchet of Gondor is still alive, the one unit that they're still commanding. Presumably they're going to try and get it into position, do a bit of bombarding. But as we skip through the hills, let's have a look from the defenders' perspective here. The Lurtz hunting pack firing. Single projectile let loose, and this is going to be a bit of a problem for the Dwarves because now the champions of the White Hand and the Trolls are coming up here, and do they have anything that can stop that? Because Dwarven miners definitely won't. These champions of the White Hand have done a lot of the heavy lifting in this battle. So far, if I were to pick a single unit for the blue team which has been MVPs, it would be these guys. They've flitted around the battlefield, helping where necessary. Very, very powerful though. Now the Trolls are going to come forward. And naturally the Trolls are much stronger than miners. Uruk-hai is still taking some nasty damage from the archers though. You would imagine these dwarves are probably going to break. They are now shaken, yeah, they're not going to last too much longer. Meanwhile, these miners are going to charge in with the support of those projectiles from the Orc Hunters, but it is only a couple of units of miners. You would imagine the pikes will be able to keep their front line in the correct shape. It's when the Sons of the Fallen move forward that these Uruk-hai pikemen need to be a little bit more concerned. And there are warriors on the way forward as well. Those miners actually did not break. That's very impressive. And now the trolls and the champions are falling back. A couple of units of warriors. I'm not sure why they're pulling back with quite such gusto. I suppose they're going to allow the elves to try and do this, and they'll commit the trolls and the champions elsewhere. Oh, I think I see why. Yes, indeed, the Black Riders are trying to infiltrate the back ranks, and the Uruk-hai crossbows are going to be their target, surely. But the champions and the trolls should be able to do some nice damage to them. Meanwhile, once again, the Orc Javelins, they're trying to skirmish Mordor in the Misty Mountains, but they're really not going to make too much of a dent at this point. They did some nice skirmish damage earlier on all of these dead elves, but ultimately, that time has passed. You no longer have skirmish superiority. Isengard with their crossbows certainly do, but the Black Riders trying to do some, with the Olar-kai trying to do some special forces type manoeuvres, not going to be successful. The champions are here, and of course the crossbows would have got a volley off on them as well, which would have been very nasty indeed. Well, naturally the miners no match for the elves and melee. The elves, these miners are actually still alive. They have not broken, and technically speaking, they've seen a lot of elite units turn their backs on them. Meanwhile, this hunting pack has charged forward into melee, maybe somewhat recklessly. I don't know what they're trying to do. Maybe that was a misclick. That could be the sort of misclick which ends up costing them the game, because this hunting pack is shaken and they will break. These pikes are still holding. Perhaps they're simply trying to buy the pikes a little bit more time by holding up all of these warriors. There's also 3rd Legion there, of course. The Ballista. Not sure where the Ballista's going to go. Try and get into a decent position. Those Uruk-hai Berserkers, they're going to need more support down here, I think. Really, it's going to come down to whether the defenders have enough manpower to survive. Still got that Legion bodyguard. Here come the Snaga. Which admittedly... Oh, I see. I think they were trying to get the Ballista up here because there is a gap in the defences. These Snaga are shaken. Yeah, that battered unit of Orc Hunters has done a lot of work so far. Doing a nice amount of damage. And I think, Hiri Peng, there's some Nazkai moving forward. But yeah, I think this is a big oversight here. They should have known that this was an area that you could traverse, and they haven't got any reinforcements on hand. They seem more intent on guarding that approach over there, which is a bit strange considering that that approach over there is more easily reinforceable. Whereas this one over here may already be in a bit of trouble. The Warriors of Khazad-dûm taking some damage from the Snaga. Time will tell. The Dwarves do still need to make this stick by committing forward a decent chunk of their forces. And they don't have too much in reserve. And with the Nazkai and this unit of Hiri Peng, they might be able to throw off this attack. One of the Isengard Ballistas got caught on the hillside. The dangers of bringing siege on a mountain pass style map. Those Nazkai didn't really get the best engagement. They charged right into the back of their own pikes, which is not going to damage your own pikes, of course, but it means you won't get the charge bonus off on the enemy infantry, which of course the Nazkai have a pretty nasty charge. Hiri Peng. Honestly, even if they catch out the Lurtz hunting pack, the healthier unit anyway, which is up here somewhere, question mark? At least it was. This Ballista I think is going to try and get into a position to shoot these dwarves, but the dwarves are going to move to make it more awkward. Now is the time for the red team. Khazad-dûm are charging forward, so this is where the battle is going to be decided, these next few moments, I think. Very balanced force so far, although eventually you'd have to imagine that the Nazkai's sheer power would be enough to overpower the Dwarven Legion units. And the pikes doing work here for Isengard, keeping the dwarves at bay, making it a little bit more difficult for them to advance, but is this the moment that we have been waiting for? Well, we do have some morale on infantry on the front line, but naturally, oh boy, that frame rate. Really would rather it not crash at this point in the battle. Oh, look at that. Those crossbow bolts. I'm not sure whether they're targeting the Olag High or the Orc Javelins, but they hit both, so that's nice. Naturally, these Moranon infantry. The Oathbreakers have taken damage, presumably from the extensive skirmish that's been going on. Which would, of course, suggest that their hit points have been substantially cut down. Mordor committing forward some of their units. That is a lovely 2D tree. Now then. It's over here, I think. Khazad-dûm, need to be the ones. If they can break the Isengard defense in places, that could be just what they need. Uruk-hai crossbows. It's over here that the main advance is happening. The Sons of the Fallen are coming forward. The Legion Bodyguard are going to follow them. Defeat seems certain for the 3rd Legion. The Nazkai are not going to be an easy unit to fight your way through. But with this amount of Sons of the Fallen, you should be able to do it with the support of some of this 3rd Legion. And you still have those archers being a nuisance for Isengard's defence. There goes the singular Black Rider, the Plague Doctor.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Hiri Peng killing off the 3rd Legion. Up here, meanwhile, these warriors of Khazad-dûm are shaken. The close proximity of the Lurtz hunting pack not helping matters for them. So this is it now. There's a lot of red still on the other side of the map that the Oathbreakers are going to have to deal with. But Khazad-dûm could be the ones here to deal some damage. And you can see now, Uruk-hai pikemen. Are those berserkers? They are not. At this point, the Uruk-hai berserkers need to get in here. I feel as though that really is my only criticism of the Isengard player throughout this match, as he's been very, very slow to reinforce his defensive lines when they've started to crumble. Now is the time these berserkers need to get in here. Obviously with the Champions of the White Hand, he did a magnificent job throughout the fight, but again, at this point in time, when you're outnumbered, you can afford to make no mistakes, really. And if the Dwarves end up pushing through here, it could be disastrous. Those warriors of Khazad-dûm taking hefty losses there from the Uruk-hai crossbows. The warriors of Khazad-dûm and the 3rd Legion trying to advance through this gorge. The guards of Orthanc are going to block their advance, of course. Multiple HP spears. Very tough, very hardy. Not exactly the fastest killing machines there are, but very difficult to barge out the way. These Sons of the Fallen overwhelming the Hiri Peng. The Lurtz hunting pack finishing off these warriors of Khazad-dûm. What's happening with the Oathbreakers? Still, there's a pretty extensive fight over here. More and more goblins and orcs are charging forward. But it is a combination of Uruk-hai infantry, elven spears, and the Oathbreakers here on the front line. 203 Oathbreakers. I'm not sure whether they're going to have the staying power to do this, you know. They are taking losses, and there are still Temple Executioners to deal with, as well as Snow Trolls, Minas Morgul Chosen, so many. There's some Yaragwe Nanwe, the Delupeng Emanduia. Aradirith taking charge damage from the Black Riders. Yeah, I think they're going to need help, and they're going to need help that isn't going to come, I think, because Isengard are going to need to commit a lot of their resources to dealing with the Dwarves. The Uruk-hai Berserkers have charged forward, but far too late, in my opinion. These pikes have already been cut down to size so heavily. Their line barged out the way, and you can't afford to be so frivolous with your men at this late stage of the battle. Snaga skirmishers. What are they going to target? Legion Bodyguard? They are. The multiple HP will probably be enough to save the Legion Bodyguard. Did I say that? Pretty nicely done there. I think the Nazkai are going to end up being the saving grace over here. The Sons of the Fallen are going to have to be dealt with by the Trolls, if anything. These Snaga need to continue to do nasty damage to the Legion Bodyguard. Perhaps killing a general is just what the Doctor ordered for them. And the Legion Bodyguard are starting to take losses from these Snaga javelins. Substantial ones at that. Crossbows. It's this onslaught over here that I'm worried about, and what is going on down there. That's a lot of routing. Based on the column, it almost looked like an advance. Victory seems certain still for the Oathbreakers and their support, Uruk-hai infantry and the like. But it's how long they can withstand this assault, because now we're starting to see units like Minas Morgul Chosen getting in here. And as soon as a little gap appears, you can bet that Ragnar is going to try and get his Black Riders into the back lines, which that may very well be game, set, match, red team. Uruk-hai crossbowmen moving around. I'd imagine the Berserkers have turned the tide over here, and indeed they have. Uruk-hai Berserkers, almost tailor-made to fight the Dwarves in many ways in melee. All of their damage comes from their really nasty AP values. Meanwhile, there is Nazkai down here, a second unit of Nazkai, helping out the Guards of Orthanc deal with the 3rd Legion. So Isengard are going to win down in the Gorge, but it's up here. The Legion Bodyguard have taken a lot of damage from the Snaga, though. Snaga, MVPs. I think Isengard are going to win over here, which they need to. They need to badly, so that they've got some reinforcements for the other side, because I don't feel as though the Oathbreakers are going to be enough to deal with that all on their own. These Sons of the Fallen, meanwhile, are going to be enough to take down this one unit of Lurt's hunting pack. Will the Trolls of the White Hand charge in? This one Black Rider is still alive. Still running around the battlefield like a lunatic. These Nazkai still doing nasty damage. The Legion Bodyguard need to get in there to help their Sons of the Fallen, otherwise the Nazkai will win that fight. And down here, Isengard are going to have some reinforcements available to them soon enough. The Guards of Orthanc and the Nazkai, exactly the sort of units you want freed up in the late game to do your bidding. Although the Uruk-hai Berserkers starting to run out of steam a little bit. The Orc Hunters, which presumably have run out of ammo from their cliff over there, at least one of the units has, coming in to reinforce. Will that be enough? We shall see. Uruk-hai crossbows getting into a position. The Snagas still throwing their payloads in. And there goes Balin. Dwarven units probably have the morale to keep going, especially units like Sons of the Fallen, which I'm fairly certain are locked morale. Oh, this is close. Very close indeed. The Trolls probably going to come in here to try and reinforce. Uruk-hai crossbows. The Oathbreakers are not actually in melee anymore. Mainly because of the Black Riders. Although those Black Riders, presumably they tried to push through, and presumably they got caught on some of the Elf Spears. And this is going to be the end of the Black Riders, although, if they're lucky, might also be the end of the Champions of the White Hand. Looks like both units have essentially killed one another, which honestly is a better thing for the red team at this point in time, I would think, because the Champions of the White Hand are exactly the sort of tool which they want to get rid of. Here come the Temple Executioners, and in fact, how many Orc reinforcements are there left? None. Oh my. This battle might be heading in the direction of the blue team after all. Seems like most of the forces over here were actually forces that were just routing off. The Oathbreakers' defeat now seems certain. They've taken a lot of damage. The Minas Morgul chosen, Temple Executioners. Those Trolls are still just loitering. We'll see what they do. Uruk-hai Berserkers, victory seems certain, so they have been able to secure victory over here. It's going to be real close, this one. Snaga Skirmishers pulling back. That Lurt's hunting pack, if it still has ammunition, could be the sort of thing which swings this fight. The Gondorian Trebuchet is another wild card in this situation. If it gets into a position, all it needs really is one solid hit on one of the most important units, and that'll be enough to give the victory to the red team, I would assume. All kinds of custom victory seems certain, are you sure? The Uruk-hai Berserkers? Isengard at this point, I think, are pulling all their units back to consolidate, which is wise. Trying to spread themselves too thin will leave too many gaps at this point, which they can scarcely afford. How much damage can the Oathbreakers do, is the question. Because they need to thin the ranks of these Mordor units a bit. The 2 units of Minas Morgul chosen, proving to be a real factor, but also the Blackback Berserkers and the Temple Executioners are 2 exceptionally powerful melee units. The Lurt's hunting pack might be able to get into a position to use their body-piercing projectiles here. The Snaga Skirmishers as well, with their javelins. The Trolls could be a real factor. The Nazkai will be able to go 1-to-1 with the Temple Executioners and Blackback Berserkers without getting slaughtered. But they will be outnumbered in that fight. The Champions of the White Hand are still alive, which I think they are actually going to try and go after the Trebuchet to prevent any calamity from befalling their units. If that hit the Berserkers, that could have been a decisive blow. What are these guards of Orthanc going to do? Are they just going to be left as a rear guard to try and hold the dwarves at bay? Presumably, but not the best formation for them to be left in. I mean, definitely the real danger at this point in time is going to come from this section of the battlefield over here. The Snaga are just being thrown in there. It's a unit of 4 Delupang, which for a long time now have been using their body-piercing projectiles. There goes Thranduil. The Arguei Nanwaith have been in the middle of that mess for quite some time. Merc would have definitely done their part on both sides of the conflict. Both sides of the map, I should say. And those are Black Riders, which could still be a factor, just like the Champions of the White Hand could. These Guards of Orthanc are, of course, going to be overwhelmed. We'll see what there is to be gained from throwing them under the bus. And what's going on over there? Those are the Champions of the White Hand, chasing down something. Berserkers. It's going to be difficult, I think, for Isengard to dig their way out of this. They are going to be leaning on the Oathbreaker's ability to just not die an awful lot. Uruk-hai crossbows. You can see the Minas Morgul Chosen desperately trying to push their way through to the crossbows at this point. The Black Riders will also come over here to try and do the same, I would imagine. What happened? The Snaga were committed, and Temple Execution's defeat is almost certainly. The Oathbreakers pulling it out here. If the Oathbreakers can hold, and they are going to be reinforced by Nazkai of all things, which will make mincemeat of Minas Morgul Chosen with the right support. Those Berserkers chanting to themselves. That would be Gondor. That Trebuchet almost certainly was butchered by the Champions. Lurt's hunting pack. Those Trolls could still be a big factor as well. Snaga are routing, which is to be expected. Just put in there for a bit of a meat shield. This, however, could also be another problem for Isengard, because their Guards of Orthanc, of course, are overwhelmed. But there really is nothing else. This really is the final pocket of Dwarven attack, and it is Sons of the Fallen and a few Legion bodyguard. Well, there goes Azov, the Oathbreakers doing their part. Those Delupang still firing. I wonder how many kills they've got as a unit like this. Slow and steady wins the race. Uruk-hai crossbows. Presumably just trying to make sure the Black Riders can't try and charge through the lines and cause havoc. A single volley from those crossbows would probably be sufficient to bring them down at this point. Only 4 remaining. Hit points certainly gone. And at this point the Oathbreaker is starting to struggle, but here come the Trolls. The derpy Trolls of the White Hand. And that's enough to cause the Minas Morgul Chosen to start thinking about breaking. They're now shaken. They're tired. And the Trolls will do extensive damage. The Temple Executioners are going to be difficult to beat. There are some Uruk-hai Berserkers also coming in here. I'm surprised that the Trolls are not being moved in. The Trolls need to be committed now, in my opinion. They need to do some heavy damage, because if they leave it too long, the Temple Executioners are just going to be able to do such damage with the support of the Blackback Berserkers as well, which presumably are still in there. There's still 66 of them. They need to get in there. They need to stop faffing around and just get in there. Stop being clever about this and just do some damage. And you can see over here that this is where the line is weak. Send your Trolls in. There's nothing to lose. And then you can start collapsing in and surrounding the forces over here and doing some damage. As it is, though, this indecision from Isengard could cost them the match. At this point we're talking very fine margins. Those Uruk-hai crossbows are firing at the Black Riders, getting another kill. Those Delupang Yamanduya. Friendly Black Rider. I say friendly. I admit to somewhat rooting for the outnumbered Blues here. Champions the White Hand are still here. Khazad-dûm's assault, technically speaking, was a success. They've broken through the gorge area, forced Isengard back into a bottleneck. They don't have much left, but Sons of the Fallen, definitely a good unit to have. That's a big rout. That's a huge rout. The fear may finally have taken effect. The Oathbreakers, which almost certainly do inspire fear, obviously being supported by the Nazkai. Now the trolls are coming in, and now there really is nothing left to lose. Break the back of this attack as quickly as you can. That's going to be enough to do huge damage to the Minas Morgul Chosen. There are Temple Executioners in here as well, presumably. Yeah, there they are. So often, I've been used to seeing when the Temple Executioners have been committed, that's when the defenders finally succumb. But not this time, it would seem. It seems they have met their match at the top of the infantry food chain with the Oathbreakers. There goes the Plague Doctor, finally. And yeah, I think this is it. I think this is where the Blues win it. And obviously the Oathbreakers just about clinging to life. Nazkai. It was close. I thought not committing those trolls in the end could have been a bit of a mistake there, but ultimately that rout was so important. Might even have been the Plague Doctor that did it, because he did die behind enemy lines after all at the hands of the enemy Black Riders. The Lurtz hunting pack as well with their body piercing. Going to get some point blank shots into the Sons of the Fallen. Obviously they can take arrow fire better than a lot of units, but at this point it's just doing extra damage. And these Uruk-hai crossbows trying to get around to the flank to do some damage. The Dwarves just too slow to stop the Rangers. Temple Executioners trying to push through. Yeah, these Blackback Berserkers now outmatched Trolls, Nazkai, Oathbreakers all around. And the Sons of the Fallen try to go after the Lurtz hunting pack, but only meet the Uruk-hai Berserkers. And at this point, yeah, the blue team are going to win this. Isengard have got the skirmishers. They've got the power. They've got the backstop of the Oathbreakers, which are still taking losses. There's only 25 of them remaining. They can certainly hold their oaths fulfilled. Here come the Temple Executioners again. So often used to victory. They may have to taste defeat just this once. Very rare that we see this happen. But ultimately I think the blue team played very well. I might have been complaining about some of their... I was nitpicking them, but then nitpicking is kind of what people want me to do. My entire purpose for being. Minas Morgul Chosen taking crossbows, but ultimately the blue team played very well. Mirkwood, their defense against Gondor initially was very, very good, and ultimately the Gondorian armies crushing defeat over on that side was what gave the blue team the leg up they needed. Because obviously if they had some additional Gondorian support here in the late game would have made it a certain victory for the red team. But also I think that the neutrals did very well. They performed well on the summit despite being utterly overwhelmed, making Mordor waste some of their ammunition, making that position a little less useful for them. And then obviously Isengard performing as the reinforcements for both, essentially. The champions of the White Hand did very well, committing infantry units to both sides when needed. Primarily over here, it must be said. But yeah, definitely very well done. And if I had to pick an MVP, I probably would go for Isengard. Son of the Dunedain performed very well here, I think. And now it's just a matter of time. Sons of the Fallen do take a while to die. Just 3 Temple Executioners remaining. Minas Morgul Chosen breaking. The champions of the White Hand are still alive. And I have to say, I'm not sure whether I'd call them the MVPs, purely because the Oathbreakers did manage to hold off against overwhelming odds. But it would definitely be one of those two. Yeah, we may as well go into ×2 speed as we look from on high at the final engagement in this brutal choke point. Bodies strewn throughout this mountain range. There goes the enemy general. Defeated. And that general's model was actually a Mordor one, so much more fitting to the Black Riders than the random Plague Doctor. Plague Doctors were once upon a time in Cardolan's units as officers, but that idea I think was removed, and it's now just a small thing in the neutrals.
The enemy army flees the field. Pursue and run them down.
This actually wasn't too bad. I didn't have to turn the graphics down quite to the bottom settings. Obviously the vegetation We've got the 2D, but the frame rate wasn't even that bad for such a hefty choke point fight. So there you go. And the Sons of the Fallen really not eager to go down without a fight. Obviously in typical Dwarven fashion, taking a long time to be defeated. But ultimately this is going to be the end now. Even the crossbows want a piece of the action. There really isn't much left of the defenders other than this though. 97% to 97%. Still units routing all over the field, of course. But basically dead even.
Let it be a salve upon our wounds.
Indeed. And there we go. So the most kills going to Master Blaster, and we'll see what got that initially. Obviously I said Isengard were the MVPs. They got the fewest kills, but I do think that the job they did was very, very important. Obviously the neutrals and Mirkwood were able to take advantage of the initial attacks, which fed them a lot of kills. But Isengard, of course, supported both sides admirably. Gondor obviously getting the fewest kills for the attackers, that's unsurprising. They really bounced off the Mirkwood line very ineffectively. But that's not really, I think the only mistake Gondor made was not waiting for support. They needed a little bit more help from Khazad-dûm before they simply charged in. If they did that, then their all-out aggressive push could have cracked the Mirkwood line. The most effective attacking force, Mordor, again, doesn't surprise me too much based on the army they had. They were able to surround that position on the summit and get a lot of kills up there. And they also had the right units to get kills, stuff like the Olakai, Black Riders, Temple Executioners, a lot of nice stuff. But ultimately, Gondor really the only major outlier, everyone doing reasonably well. Let's have a look at what got the kills for the neutrals. Black Riders getting a lot, naturally. They were charging around the battlefield doing a lot of damage, especially early on. Let's have a look over here. We can see the Ents got 111 kills. The Oathbreakers only got 183, presumably because they don't have a lot of attack. They just have a lot of defense, which made it so very difficult for them to push their way through. This leads me to believe they'd probably still be susceptible to mass pushes. So it's a shame really that the Cave Trolls weren't on hand to deal with the Oathbreaker line. If they were, this could have gone very differently. Dead of the Marshes, on the other hand, 476 kills for an infantry unit which was outnumbered and overwhelmed for the vast majority of the time it was fighting. So they obviously did very well. And the rest of their forces, Orc Hunters getting a lot of kills. Obviously Archers in general doing quite well. One of the units of Blackwold's doing very well in the backlines of the Goblin and Dwarven push. That unit of Pike's doing very well. So nice spread of kills across a decent, healthy spread of units here. Obviously very well done to the defenders for making this work. Not often we see a 3v5 go in favour of the 3, but we did here. An average victory indeed. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which I'm not sure what fight to do next, to be honest with you. I do have a Greyhaven siege in the pipeline, which maybe we'll do that, because I do also have potentially another Mountain Pass battle. Not on this exact map, but it is obviously quite similar in the way they work. But I think we'll spread the Mountain Pass battles out a little bit, so next will probably be the Greyhaven siege, or maybe even a free-for-all, depending on how I feel when I come to do the recording. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you'll join me for that.